Kahane stretched her arms out once their homeroom teacher left.
ねえゆかりっち、もうお兄さんは出かけたの？
None of your fucking business.
夕べ出発しましたよ。
だったらさ、ゆかりっちの家に泊まりに行ってもいいかな？
No.
それはまあ構いませんが。
ほら、ゆかりっちだって一人きりだと不安でしょ？だから泊まってあげようと思って。
Well, you're not.
は
In all honesty, though, Yukari was used to being home alone, so she wasn't the least bit scared.
あ、ありがとう、小羽。
Still, she appreciated the sentiment.
じゃあさ、ゆきこちゃんも誘っていいかな？
構わないわよ。
Yukari answered once she'd finished pondering if she had enough futons for the three of them.
大丈夫だからさ。おいでよ、ゆきこちゃんも。
Kahane dragged Yukiko over.
時坂さん、一旦家に帰って。分かってますよ。
じゃあ、私とゆきこちゃんは駅前で待ち合わせしてから
私も吉祥寺に行く用事がありますので、そちらで待ち合わせしませんか？
いいよ。コーヒー屋さん？
兄がいないうちに買っておこうと思いまして。
月世界？
ご存知でしたか？
あのお店。
では、お店で待ち合わせでも構いませんか？
いいよ。
No, you're not. Fuck off. The three friends departed once they were ready to leave.
先輩方。
佐藤さん、これから部活動？
そうだ、あゆむっちもゆかりっちのとこ泊まりに来ない？
Kahane made the very same offer to Yukari had just been considering.
申し訳ありませんが、年内はずっと部活があるので。
そっか、残念。
Kahane's shoulder slumped.
私たちも年内は美術部の活動をしますから。
ではまた。
Ayumu bowed and headed for the kendo dojo.
ねえゆかりっち、美術部って私も参
No,
加していい
fuck
の？
off.
小羽も部員じゃありません。
Not that she'd ever drawn so much as a doodle.
時坂さん。ありがとう。じゃあ私たちは一旦帰って用意してくるわね。
また後で。
Yukari entered Moonworld after doing a little shopping in Kichijoji.
あら、ゆかりちゃんいらっしゃい。
こんにちは。コーヒー豆が切れてしまったので買いに来たんですが。
ちょっと待っていてね。
Kyoko got ready to roast the beans. In the meantime, Yukari took a seat at the farthest stool from the door so she wouldn't bother any other customers.
はい。
Kyoko poured Yukari a cup of coffee.
ありがとうございます。京子さん。
何？
なんでもありません。
Yukari held her tongue. She was worried about how tired Kyoko looked, but figured it would have been pointless to ask her about it. After all, Kyoko did all she could to hide her suffering in tough times, just like Reiji. She'd been like that for as long as Yukari had known her, especially when she lost her husband. Even as a little girl, Yukari had been able to tell Kyoko was trying to put on a brave face, and had wished futilely that she could do something to help. Does Reiji notice too? Maybe I'll tell him when he gets back without being too on the nose about it.
時坂くんのは深入りでいいのよね。
Oh, King.
はい。お
Hell
願いし
yeah,
ます。
that's my guy. I love a good dark roast. So I was just sipping on when I started this recording session. Let's fucking go. The mellow aroma of coffee wafted from the counter in Yukari's mug. Yukari took a little sip. It had a strong profile, more sour than bitter. The coffee she had at home was typically on the latter side. That's how Reiji liked it, she figured. Yukari poured in a spoonful of sugar and stirred. Nah, we don't play with that sugar shit. Dark roast, black, yummy. She figured it'd be much easier to drink that way. In the meantime, she watched as Kyoko roasted the beans. The older woman seemed the same as ever, but occasionally she'd yawn and reveal a weary look on her countenance for the briefest of moments. I'm sure Reiji hasn't noticed that. Kyoko probably put on a tough front around Reiji knowing her. Just then the door opened with Kahane and Yukiko subsequently filing in.
お待たせゆかりっち。
お邪魔します。
いらっしゃいませ。どうぞゆっくりしていってね。
The three friends moved to a table. Kyoko quickly served them 2 extra cups of coffee.
サービスよ。
ありがとうございます。
どうも。夕飯は何がいいですか？
Yukari asked a question that had just taken root in her mind.
美味しいものなら何でもいいよ。虫以外でね。
As That certainly limited her options. Then again, it was hard to find tasty insects in the winter, so that was no skin off her teeth.
湯豆腐にしましょうか。ネギとお豆腐を買っていけばできますし、貝原さんも食べられるでしょ。
Yukiko nodded.
湯豆腐にはタラの切り身もよく合うわよ。
Kyoko chimed in.
あとはポン酢があればいいですね。
貝原さんはタラ。多分。
Yukiko nodded uncertainly.
あら、冬美さんはうちの子は魚もお肉も食べたがらないって。
Yukiko gasped. So Kyoko knows Kayahara's mother, does she?
それは。
アレルギーがあるわけじゃないんでしょ。
Yukiko's voice tapered off.
無理はしなくてもいいんですよ。
Yukiko shook her head before Yukiko could finish.
食べてみます。わかりました。
In that case, I'll have to pull out all the stops to ensure it comes out great. Then again, there wasn't exactly much cooking skill involved in hot pot.
だったらこの近くにある魚屋さんへ行ってごらんなさい。
はい、わかりました。
それじゃあそろそろ行く？
Kana got up after finishing her coffee.
もう少しいましょうか。
Yukiko urged Kana back down after seeing Yukiko hadn't finished her coffee yet.
ありがとう。
Yukiko whispered quietly so only Yukiko could hear her. The three eventually left the cafe.
じゃあ魚屋さんに行きましょうか。
鮭もいいかなって思ったり。
Shut up. Kana spoke her
そ
mind.
れもいいですね。
Suddenly, Yukiko timidly cut in.
何？
私はタラがいいと思う。それもそうですね。
ねえ、鮭は？
Fuck you.
今回はタラにしましょう。
Yukiko decided to prioritize Yukiko's wishes this time. Good. She figured she'd be happier that way.
ごちそうさま。
Kana threw herself onto the floor after dinner.
行儀悪いですよ、小羽。
お腹いっぱい。
食べてすぐ横になると牛になってしまいますよ。
それは嫌。
Kana got up.
時坂さん、それはお出汁を取るのに使ったものですから食感はいまいちですけど。そうなんだ。
なに、ゆきこちゃん、毛を増やしたいの？
Yukiko was flustered by Kohane's question.
でもゆきこちゃんの髪は長くて綺麗だし。あ、まさか。
Yukiko's face warped in confusion.
はいはい、お鍋を片付けますよ。
Yukiko donned pot holders as if to say the conversation was
お
over.
風呂も沸いてますから順番に入ってくださいね。
Oh, not the bath scene.
ねえねえゆかりっち、お風呂って広い？
Yeah, big enough for two. So Yukari and Yukiko can go first, and you can get the fucking cold seconds, you worthless shit.
そこまで広いわけではありません。
Still, it was large enough for Yukari to stretch out her legs and enjoy a nice long soak.
うふ
Fuck you. No. Connie's lips curled into a mischievous smirk.
ほらほら、女の子同士なんだし、遠慮しないでパーッと脱いじゃいなさいよ。
Ugh, I hate you.
でも恥ずかしい。手ぬぐいはそこにありますから使ってくださいね。ありがとう。
これは結構。
やめ。小羽ね、早く入らないと風邪ひきますよ。
はーい、ゆきこちゃんも早くしなよ。
着替えさせてくれなかったくせに。
Nah, I'm just gonna cut this out. This is too much. Well, no, actually, I might be able to censor this without having to do too much work. Never mind, we'll see. So it looks like Kohane and Yukiko's boobs are like perfectly go around the text, so I can like censor them without covering up the text and having to do too much editing. And then Yukari's just off doing her own thing. Props, girl. Yukari sat on the bath stool and washed her body. Meanwhile, Kohane and Yukiko are soaked in the tub.
うわあ、本当に大きいと浮かぶんだ。いや、あんまり見ないで。ちょっと触ってみてもいい？
Don't look at him. Fine, I'll touch him then.
さっきから触ってるじゃない。じゃあいいってことだよね。そうじゃなくて。小羽、嫌がっているのだから無理強いしてはいけません
Yeah,
よ。
kill her.
嫌よ嫌よも好きのうちって言うじゃない。本当に嫌なんだけど。もう。
Yukari sprayed her shoulders with hot water to get the suds off.
ゆかりっちも肌綺麗だよね。そうですか？
Yukari raised her arms and studied her skin. She didn't think it looked particularly different from anyone else's.
特に手入れをしていることもないのですが。ナメクジとかヒルとかに皮膚の古い角質を食べさせたりとかしてないの？ヒルは肉食ですが、ナメクジは草食ですよ。それで、ユキコちゃんはどうやったらそんなに大きくなったの？知らないわよ。
Yukiko covered her breasts. She's not wrong though. They really are big. Yukari found herself unconsciously staring at her own breasts. However, she immediately realized it'd be pointless to compare them.
月世界のお姉さんも大きかったよね。
Fuck yeah, she do.
あの人は昔からそうですよ。へえ、お兄さんと付き合ってたりするの？
Yukari pondered Kahane's question. Kyoko and Reiji had been close for as long as she could remember. Though Reiji had his fiancée Yukiko, while Kyoko had her husband. However, Reiji had indeed started spending a lot of time in Moonworld after they lost their significant others. Would you call that dating? Unfortunately, Yukari wasn't all that familiar with the delicate works of those sorts of relationships.
そういうことは。
Thus, she chose to go with the safe answer. Whatever the nature of their relationship was, she didn't think dating, not dating, really described it.
そうなんだ。あのお店、いい雰囲気ですよね。
Yukiko sounded more like she was saying that to herself.
ええ、そうね。ユキコちゃん、好きなんでしょ？ええ、まあ、憧れみたいな。ルイは友を呼ぶというのかしら。
Kahane poked Yukiko's breast to punctuate that point.
ユキコちゃんってそっちの趣味があるの？そっちってほら S みたいなお姉様ってやつ。そんなこと。
Says the woman who's constantly squeezing tits. If anything, Yukari felt Kohane felt that bill better than Yukiko. Oh, the constant groping. She decided to keep her mouth shut. The group finished their bath and laid their futons out in Yukari's room.
ふぅ、気持ちよかった。
Fuck you.
小羽、その手の動きはやめた方がいいと思いますよ。
ユキコちゃんも気持ちよかったわよね。
Yukiko showed little reaction despite Kohane's suggestive choice of words. That wasn't a surprise, though. Considering Yukiko was suffering from some degree of heat stroke,
大丈夫ですか？
Yukari poured her a glass of cold water and handed it over.
ありがとう。
Yukiko's face was still flushed, yet she expressed her gratitude all the same.
小羽、やりすぎですよ。
Yeah, kill her. Yukari chided her friend.
ごめんね、ユキコちゃん。
Kohane sincerely apologized. Yukiko shook her head.
もう随分と楽になったから。でもすぐに横にならない方がいいでしょうね。
じゃあさ、恋バナしよう、恋バナ。
Kohane leaned forward eagerly, even though Yukari couldn't understand how or why she jumped to that topic.
こういうのってお約束じゃない？ねえ、ゆかりっち。
別に話すことなんてありませんけれど。
Yukari was only being honest, seeing as how no one came to mind.
またまた。おとついたあの人はどうなのよ。
おとつい、まさきさんですか？
Yukari cocked her
プレ
head.
ゼント渡してたじゃない。
それは兄がお世話になっているからですよ。寒いところへ出かけるとおっしゃっていましたし。
怪しい。
怪しまれても困りますが。
あたし？ない。
Bitch, you brought up the topic. Kohane swiftly shook her head.
女学校じゃそういう出会いなんてないでしょ。男の先生もおじいちゃんばかりだしさ。
昔のでしたら語ることはできるんですね。
でもほんと子供の頃のお話だよ。 どんな人？
Yukiko chimed in with that simple question.
どんな人って覚えてない？ごめんなさい。
Yukiko hung her head.
まあ仕方ないよね。
It was then that Yukari recalled Yukiko had said she didn't remember being childhood friends with Kohane.
じゃあユキコちゃんは？女の人は月世界のお姉さんとして男の人はどうなの？そんなの。ゆかりっちのお兄さんなんてお買い得だよ。
Yeah, I think that man's taken in more ways than one. His heart belongs to Toko and his dick belongs to Kyoko, so I mean, there's not much left for you.
人の兄を特売品みたいに言わないでください。
If anything, he'd be out in the trash with the rest of the unsold goods. God damn, Yukari!
時坂さんの
Yukiko brought her hand to her chin in contemplation.
付き合ってる人もいないんだし狙い目じゃない？はあ。
Yukari decided to hold her tongue for the time being. Reiji was indeed single. However, she also knew there was a woman he was still chasing, and that there was little chance anyone else could take her place. That was just how much dominion she held over his heart.
ゆかりっちはどう思う？
Kane's voice snapped Yukari back to reality.
何がです？眠くなっちゃった？あのね、ゆきこちゃんはお兄さんにお似合いだと思わないって話。そうですね。
Yukari scrutinized Yukiko from head to toe. In a way, she did resemble her. Yeah, I know. I kind of noticed that right away. That was why Yukari had reached out to her in the first place.
はい？そんなに見つめられると。
Yukiko blushed and hung her head.
お、もしかしてゆかりっちも標的？そんなこと。
Yukiko curled herself further and further into a ball. Yukari was thrilled that she could now have ordinary conversations with Yukiko. After all, the girl had barely let anyone in back after they first met.
そろそろ休みましょうか。
As such, she felt it best they ended this talk on that light note. The three went to bed after turning the lights off. Kane started snoring instantly, almost like she just ran out of gas.
時坂さん、起きてる？ええ。
Yukari turned to face her friend.
私、前にいたところに大切な友達がいたの。
Yukiko began talking in a hushed whisper.
その子は友達のいなかった私に。
Yukari had heard about that. She recalled the rumor that had been flying around right after Yukiko transferred. The one about Yukiko killing her friend.
大丈夫よ。
Yukari stuck her hand out and reached for Yukiko. Yukiko timidly took Yukari's hand.
大丈夫。私たちはいつまでもそばにいるから。ありがとう。
Yukari drifted off to sleep before she even knew it, her fingers still interlaced with Yukiko's. Well, that's just sweet. Ooh, Toji POV. Toji was grappling in her office with the document she'd sent for her. Unfortunately, I am going to have to end this recording session here for today. As much as I would love to see Toji's point of view on everything going down, and as much as I wanted to get to the Hitogata homecoming, it simply was not meant to be for today. But holy fuck. I've never been more, I don't think I've ever been more invested into a fucking mystery story than I have this one. Like, I am genuinely, I don't think I've ever, like, theorized this much for a murder mystery before. Of all the ones I've played and seen and whatnot, like, I don't think I've ever just, like, sat down and compared notes and looked at all these various sources and tried to, like, compare conclusions and whatnot. This game has my brain fucking running, and I love it. I'm loving this story. I'm loving the way it's pulling me into it. I wish I could just marathon this shit and go hard in it, but unfortunately I do not have the time for that. But goddamn, I'm loving it. I am fucking loving it. And I cannot wait to see where we go from here. Like I said, I'm gonna have to wrap it up here for today. So it's either gonna be a quick transition or a new video, but regardless, I'll see y'all in the next recording session. Until then, peace. What is up, everyone, and welcome back to some more of the Shell Part 2. In the previous recording session, we finally got Masaki's identity truly revealed. And it was the obvious answer. It was Ayato, which obviously I wasn't too surprised by that. I was kind of preparing myself for some maybe, an out-of-nowhere twist. It was actually someone else, but yeah, it seemed pretty obvious from the jump it was Ayato, but, that's fine. We got some backstory as to what happened with Ayato and why he left Hitogata, why he's on the run, why he changed his name, all of that. Very interesting. He and Reiji did leave for Hitogata. We never actually got to the point where they arrive in Hitogata, so I imagine I'm gonna see that sometime today. And they left for Hitogata, and we've been seeing some other bits and pieces from other people building up to the point where Masaki Ayato finally returns to Hitogata. I'm very curious what that interaction's gonna be like. I do remember the fact that Masaki buried Satsuki's limbs at their old hideout. I'm curious to see if that does come into play at some point. Like, those limbs get used to ID who she was. Because I feel like that's gotta play a part. Because no one knows where those are, right? After he killed Saya, he grabbed the limbs and ran. No one was following him. He buried them and then just kept running. As far as I'm aware, no one knows that he took those limbs and buried them, or if they knew that he took them, they don't know where he left them, right? And no one would really know about his hideout, other than obviously his old friends, but obviously they wouldn't assume that he would bury her limbs there. I feel like that does come into play at some point. In the same vein that I think at some point Chizuru's roll of film that didn't get taken will come into play, because when someone broke into her room and stole film out of her camera, it was a fresh roll that had no photos on it because she had changed it out the night before. I feel like at some point that's gonna come into play, but I feel like that one's definitely gonna be a bit later down the line. Very curious to see how everything starts to come together, though. Very excited. I've been loving the story up to this point, so absolutely excited to see where we go from here. So without further ado, let's just jump back into it, shall we? Toji was grappling in her office with the document she'd sent for. Oh, I forgot to click in. My bad. Her mind turned to Yaginuma's request that she look into those illegal clinical trials. First thing she needed was proof the Blessed Congregation was dabbling in such matters. After that, she'd investigate where the group's money was coming and going. Involvement with clinical trials meant involvement with either doctors, hospitals, or third-party organizations, which in turn would leave a money trail behind. Even though piety could drive the laity into action, it was a different story for the organization as a whole, the higher-ups. For what motivated them was a lust for glory and greed. That much was clear from looking at their ledger. Specifically, the ledger of alms donated by their believers that was currently sitting next to Toji's ashtray. Sums of individual contributions ranging from dozens to thousands of yen lined its pages. Though she couldn't dig any deeper into those, since no donor names were listed, there were still some parts that struck her as odd, such as how 20 people had each donated 5,000 yen on the same day. That had clearly been a single donation of 100,000 yen split up. There was no proof, of course, but Toji was sure of it. She popped a cigarette into her mouth and lit it up. The pungent stench of tobacco filled her nose before she mulled on that ledger once more. The oddities hadn't ended with that donation. Similar contributions were made several times a year. However, Toji's investigation had revealed the majority of the Blessed Congregation's believers were poor, at least from what she could tell. And considering how the organization had supposedly been established to provide relief for sedentary believers, she couldn't imagine they had 20 faithful who could afford to donate a month's worth of salary. These donations had begun in 1952. All of them were massive contributions split up between many, totaling about 60 to 80,000 yen each time. One might think they were using this money to support their needy followers. However, there was evidence to the contrary. An examination of the ledger's expenses column had revealed most of the money was going to a different organization entirely. No, different organization wasn't the right way to put it. They were a corporation belonging to the same conglomerate as the Blessed Congregation. This was probably the source of the small jobs Keigo Utsuki had mentioned. Hinagami Pharmaceuticals? That corporation ran a money lending operation. Never mind that. They probably lent the Blessed Congregation donations to their clients. Perhaps they lended to their faithful with low interest, while lending money to non-believers at high interest, though Toji knew that was pure speculation on her part. Those sorts of money-lending businesses that targeted individuals have become rampant in recent times, since banks couldn't give loans to individuals due to the post-war recovery effort. And since regulations were behind the times in that field, many of said operations were run by sketchy individuals. However, it seemed this corporation made by the Blessed Congregation did indeed pay their taxes. They would have had no obligation to do so if they'd stayed solely a religious organization. So did the fact that they'd split into a for-profit corporation in spite of that, and were paying taxes mean they were doing honest business, or were they simply trying to make it look that way? Furthermore, the Blessed Congregation's organization included public benefit corporations involved in social welfare. That included institutions such as hospitals and orphanages, none of which Sendri had ever possessed. They were probably getting money from those as well. Toji figured that if the Blessed Congregation really was involved in illegal clinical trials, those facilities were where they'd be carrying them out. It was then that she realized she put her cigarette in her ashtray at some point, and that was now completely extinguished. Thus, Toji popped a new one between her lips. Unfortunately for her, the phone rang before she could light it up. She set down her lighter and picked up the phone.
もしもし、こちら青木。
A familiar voice flooded into Toji's ear.
ナナか。
Oh no! 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 Not Nana! Fuck! The caller was none other than Nana Takashiro. Damn it! She was the younger sister of Detective Shugo Takashiro, Toji's old friend.
何か用か。
いや別にただどうしているかと思って電話してみただけだ。
相変わらずだな。今どこにいるんだ。
今は鹿児島だよ。やっぱり南国はいいね。年末だというのに暖かいよ。ああ、そうそう。熊本に本村神社という社があるのだけど。
味噌天神だな。
ごめんなさい。天災で失われた社殿が今年再建されてね。
甘いな、ナナ。私は再建されたばかりの5月に行っているぞ。
さすがは当時から抜かりはないね。
Hell yeah, Queen.
当然だ。
Damn right, I'm
ところでナナ、今鹿児島にいると言っていたな。
心配せずともさすがミソが君の事務所に送っておいて。
そうか、すまない。こっちにはいつ帰ってくるんだ。
しばらく戻るつもりはないよ。
Oh, thank God. Yeah, and you know what? Hey, don't come back to Tokyo. That'd be great. If this is just their excuse for being like, oh, here's why Nana's not here. Awesome. Love it. Keep her out of this.
そうか。あまり人様に迷惑をかけないようにな。
Or cause trouble. Just don't cause trouble for me.
迷惑をかけられているのは僕の方だよ。どういつもこいつも僕が事件を解決してやっても例の一つもいいやしない。
Rather because the way you solve them causes even bigger headaches, Toji thought, that though she wisely kept it to herself.
そちらも面倒な案件を抱えているのだ、当時。なんで正義上の残党がいるのか。
よく知っているな。
新聞に載っていたからね。そうなるとシュウゴが田舎に引っ込んでいると君が関わるの。あ、いや、警部殿もいたから。
Aginuma was actually a police superintendent, but Toji couldn't be bothered to correct her.
手伝ってくれるつもりはないのだろう。
場所が遠すぎる。
Thank
それに僕
God.
は安楽椅子探偵を気取るつもりもないので。
Awesome.
だから旅をする。
As long as we don't travel to wherever she's at, perfect.
そうか、わかった。
でも、一つだ。シュウゴが正義教の資料を持っているはずだから。
そうか、わかった。
ではごきげんよう。
Toji finally lit her cigarette after hanging up the phone. Nana seemed the same as ever. Though part of Toji wanted her to help with the investigation, there wasn't much she could do from all the way down in Kyushu. As such, Toji decided to ask at Takashiro, who was close to her neighborhood, Shugo. Toji picked up the phone and dialed his number in Zishi. Yukari decided to do some spring cleaning after Kohane and Yukiko left. Oh right, they had girls' night. Yeah, forgot about that. She started by grabbing a feather duster and wiping the door frames clean. Though she didn't have anything as fancy as an electric vacuum cleaner, the task still didn't take very long. She swept everything up into a dustpan and dumped it. Afterwards, she wrung a dust cloth to its limit and washed the spots that were now free of dust. Her work was essentially repeating this process over and over again. Since the water was cold, she mixed in a bit of hot water to make her job less taxing. Yukari carried out her work in a flash. Once done with the living room, she moved her cleaning supplies into Eiji's room. He kept this place relatively clean, unlike his pigsty of an office in Shinjuku.
さてと。
Yukari tidied up the furniture and scattered wet tea leaves across the floor. Afterwards, she swept them up and and dust from the grains of the tatami mats into her dustpan. Finally, she polished the floor to a sheen with a hot dust cloth. Yukari was quite literally taking a breather when she spotted a sketchbook stuck between two shelves.
これは
For a moment, Yukari wondered what one of her sketchbooks was doing in Reiji's room. It's Toko's. But a second later, she realized it wasn't the same type of sketchbook she used. Yukari picked up the sketchbook and gasped. The name Toko Kichiki was written on the cover. Yeah. Reiji must have been gifted it after the girl's disappearance. Yukari flipped through the sketchbook with mixed feelings clouding her heart. Though many of them were just sketches, she found them all beautiful. I remember this one. I was there when she drew it. Oh, and this one too. There was even a portrait of her best friend, long gone from this world. Man. Yukari closed the sketchbook. Her heart wrenched precisely because they were so beautiful. And the fact that Reiji had this led her to believe that he was captive to the obsession known as Tokokichiki. Yeah. Yukiko woke up. Oh, hello. She took a deep breath when she realized she was safe and sound in her own room. She just had a very disturbing nightmare, and thought it hadn't been hot. And though it hadn't been hot under the covers, she was sweaty like a pig, her pajamas practically glued to her skin. She felt positively disgusting. It was all because of that dream. Yukiko wearily staggered out of bed. Should I go to the hospital? That idea sounded rather appealing at the moment, but she couldn't do it, for she had a club meeting to attend. Yukiko took off her sweaty pajamas. She shivered slightly upon being exposed to the cold winter air, but she ignored the unnerving sensation, wiped off her sweat, and got dressed. Her head felt like lead. Maybe I'll feel a little better if I wash my face.
おはようユキコ。
おはよう。
あら、風邪ひいた？具合悪そうだけど。
大丈夫。
Yukiko passed through the living room and washed her face in the kitchen. Her mind sharpened like a honed blade with each splash of cold water, waking her up.
ユキコ、朝ごはんは食べれる？
あ、大丈夫。
Yukiko turned around and answered her mother and sat at the table. A bowl of rice and grilled sardines on a stick were there waiting for her.
いただきます。
Yukiko took up her chopsticks. Her portion of sardines was on the small side, so she didn't foresee any problem with eating them. That said, she did wince at how many bones they had.
あのね、ユキコ。
何？
Yukiko put her chopsticks down and looked up.
前にさ、お友達連れて保育所に手伝いに来てって。
Her mother had mentioned they'd be short on hands at the end of the year about a half a month ago. Why was she bringing that up now?
ごめんね。
Fumi bowed her head.
あの時は手伝いなんていいから、
人手が足りないの？
そうなの。
Fumi hung her head.
いつもお手伝いを頼んでる人が帰省しちゃったのよ。
明日？
But that's far too sudden.
ごめん。急な話で申し訳ないけど、この通り。
Yukiko furrowed her brow, a mix of deep-set bewilderment and exasperation on her face upon seeing her mother groveling to her.
一応聞いてみるけど。
Yukiko gave herself that fallback. For while she was going to meet her friends, she didn't know if she'd be able to bring herself to ask Yukari and Kahane for help. If she didn't, then she'd have to go up by herself.
ごめんね。ありがとう。
Yukiko went back to her room when she'd finished breakfast and got ready to leave. That said, all her art supplies were in the club room, so she only brought a book to read. If anything, what she had ready most of all was her heart. How? How am I supposed to ask them to come help at the nursery? It's all so sudden, out there. She was worried she couldn't pull it off. For a moment, she considered just telling her mother they'd said no and going by herself. But then she'd feel bad about the extra burden that would place on Huyumi. I guess it can't hurt to just ask. Still, what if they say no? Then they say no. Yukari set her canvas on an easel and studied it from a distance. It was a drawing of a forest, specifically a colored sketch she drew in the park one summer ago. However, the colors seemed a little too dark in hindsight.
ねえ、小羽。
何？
Connie looked up from a book on Sekien's art.
この絵、どう思いますか？
どうと言われてもな。綺麗だと思うわよ。
God, you're useless.
少し暗いと思いませんか？
言われてみれば確かにそうかもしれないけど、 ゆきこちゃんはどう？
Yukiko took her nose out of an art book she'd been reading.
私は
She frantically shook her head.
ゆかりっちの絵なのに虫がいないのが良くないとか？
私だっていつも虫の絵を描いているわけではありませんよ。
Though in this case, she hadn't simply because it was too difficult to get the color of insects just right on an oil painting.
木漏れ日とかそういうのがあればいいと思うけど。木漏れ日
Yukari took another look at her painting. Now that Yukiko mentioned it, the sky did seem to be lacking in light. Yukari closed her eyes and thought back to that summer day. The rustling of the trees, their shadows which swayed with the echo of leaves brushing against one another, the strands of light shining between them.
そうね。
Yukari nodded. She probably hadn't done enough to express the summer sunlight.
ありがとう、茅原さん。私なんかがおこがましいことを言って。
Yukiko looked down and shook her head.
そんなことないわよ。
However, Yukari simply smiled at her.
自分で描いたものだからなかなか客観的に見られないものなのよ。
そんなものなのかしらね。
Kana crossed her arms and studied the painting.
そうね。夏の日差しの表現。
今茅原さんが言ったばかりじゃない。
Yukiko giggled.
やり直してみようかしら。
書き直すの？
書き直すというよりも上から修正していくという感じかしら。
Yukari produced some art
木漏
supplies.
れ日を表現するのにナイフで明るい筋をつけたりするのよ。
ナイフ？切れたりしないの？
そういうナイフではなくてきちんと絵画用に作られたヘラですよ。
どうしたの？
家に忘れてきてしまったよ。
She'd taken her art supplies home at the start of break to clean them up, only to completely forget about bringing them back.
これは違うの？
Kane pointed to a spatula with a round tip.
それはパレットナイフといって厳密に言えば用途は違うのですが。
What she left at home was a painting knife. It had a sharp tip, meaning it would have been perfect for expressing sunlight, but unfortunately she'd have to make do with what she had on hand.
時坂さん。
Yukiko timidly spoke up.
何？私が持ってるからそのペインティングナイフ。
Yukiko held out a knife that was shaped like a flat iron.
いいの？
It looked brand new from what Yukari could tell.
ええ。私が持っていても使い方がわからないし。そう。
Yukari took the painting
こ
knife.
れはこうして絵の具を削ったりして使うの。
Yukari scratched the surface of the painting with the knife. Its tapered tip shaved off the paint like butter.
そうすればほら下地に塗った色が出てきたでしょ。
There was indeed white presently visible where Yukari had scraped.
ちょっとこれじゃ日差しというよりも稲妻みたいに見えてしまうけれどね。
Yukari smiled wryly as she used a paintbrush to obscure the boundaries of the undercoat.
他にも広い面を塗りつぶしてしまう時もこうやって使うものだったんだ。私も専門の方について学んだわけではないから。
Yukari scraped off the canopy of leaves over the trees little by little as she explained her process.
すごいのね。
Yukiko's eyes had widened in response.
そんなことないわよ。
Yukari smiled and shook her head.
もっと上手い人だってたくさんいるし。
She recalled the sketchbook she'd seen in Reiji's room. Will I ever be that good?
時坂さん。何？
Yukari glanced up. The look on Yukiko's face screamed that there was something eating at her.
どうしたの？
Yukari cocked her head.
あの
Unfortunately, the door opened at that exact moment.
こんにちは、先輩方。
あゆむっちだ。部活の休憩時間？
Ayumyum. Ayumyum. No. Let me hear that again. Let me hear that again.
あゆむっちだ。部活の休憩時間？
Ayumuchida.
あゆむっちだ。部活の休憩時間？
Ayumuchida.
あゆむっちだ。部活の休憩時間？
Okay. I'll be honest, that's one I don't immediately recognize as like a nickname. So I'll let them have that one. At least that one's better. At least they didn't call her just like Ayumi. Bro, if they just called her Ayumi, I'd fucking lose my shit. Finally trotted on over to their unexpected visitor.
ええ、もうお昼を過ぎていますし。
Ayumu held up a small lunchbox.
そうですね。私たちもご飯にしましょうか。
Yukari got up and headed for the sink by the wall.
ナイフも洗わないと。後でいいから。
Yukiko shook her head.
どうせ私使わないし、きちんと洗ってお返ししますね。
Yukari didn't know all the ins and outs of using a painting knife either. As such, she wanted to brush up on them as much as possible, trying it out for herself, then teach what she'd learned to Yukiko.
ありがとうございます。手を洗ってご飯をいただきましょう。
Yukiko did as asked and took out her lunchbox.
そういえば茅原さん、先ほど何かおっしゃりたいようでした。
Yukari recalled what had happened just before Ayumu strolled in.
茅原さん。
Yukari put her lunchbox down and turned to Yukiko in full.
はい。何も遠慮する必要なんてないんですよ。お友達なのですから。何か話したいことがあるのでしたら遠慮なくおっしゃってください。
Yukiko tripped over her words. That made it painfully obvious she had something she wanted to get off her chest.
ゆきこちゃん、何か相談事？
どうかしましたか？
Kalane and Ayumu chimed in. No, this will just set her back.
二人とも待って。
Yukari held her hand out to her concerned friends for a moment before gently setting said hand on Yukiko's shoulder.
時坂、大丈夫。何も焦る必要もありませんから。
Yukiko did as Yukari instructed. Yukari knew that piling all the attention onto Yukiko would have only made her a nervous wreck. She wouldn't open up unless they gave her some space and waited until she was ready. Yukiko put her hand on her chest and caught her breath.
お茶飲まれますか？
Yukari took out a thermos.
はい。冷たいかもしれませんが。
Yukari poured the tea into the cup attached to the thermos.
どうぞ。ありがとう。
私も欲しいな。
飲み物でしたらこちらにもありますが。
Ayumu handed her thermos to Kalane before Yukari could.
ありがとう、あゆむっち。
Ayumu chi. Okay, it's just chi. Gotcha. That makes sense. Kalane spouted water like a whale's blowhole.
これ。
運動後には塩分の補給が重要ですから。お気に召しませんでしたか？
水ちょうだい。
飲みさしで申し訳ありませんが。
Yukiko gave the cup to Kalane.
ありがとう。
Yukiko giggled. That little song and dance had probably eased her tension.
聞いてほしいことが。
Yukiko then began explaining. She talked about how her mother worked at a nursery, about how they were seriously understaffed tomorrow, about her mother was hoping they could help out. Yukiko hesitantly but thoroughly laid it all out to them.
無理だったら無理だと言ってください。
Yukiko blushed and hung her head. Her shoulders shivered ever so slightly.
私は明日空いていますし、構いませんよ。
まあ、暇だから大丈夫だけ
Yeah,
ど。
you sure don't, you fucking lame ass. Kalane agreed despite not sounding all that enthused.
佐藤さんは部活
Yukiko remembered that when she saw the awkward frown on Ayumu's face.
ええ、すみません。
いいの。
Yukiko frantically waved her
保育
arms.
所はどこにあるんですか？若葉園といって確か武蔵小金井駅のそれでは武蔵小金井の駅前で待ち合わせをしましょうか。
そうね。
Kalane nodded.
皆さんありがとうございます。
Yukiko bowed her head.
実のところは個人的な興味もあるんです。
Puzzled Yukiko curiously regarded Yukari.
幼い頃から私の周りは大人の方ばかりで、 年下の子供がいませんでしたから、少しお姉さんぶりたいということもあったんですよ。
Two of her brother's friends had had a baby 2 summers ago. She'd been so tiny and adorable. You could have wondered if she too would ever have a cute little baby of her own. However, that train of thought conjured up no images whatsoever of such a fantasy. She'd never been good at picturing that sort of thing, after all.
一応私は先輩方よりも年下なんですが。
歩むっち相手にお姉さんぶるのは難しいと思うな。